ويضرب الله الأمثال للناس لعلهم يتذكرون.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والعاقبة للمتقين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Brothers and sisters, welcome to another episode of Quranic Parables, Amthalul Quran, where we go through a parable from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during this blessed month in order to gain some lessons, some knowledge and guidance from these parables. And today, inshallah ta'ala, we have not only one, we have two contrasting parables, which we'll go into shortly. As usual, I have my guest with me, Ustad Saf. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. How are you, Ustad?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, very good, mashallah. So, brothers and sisters, as usual, give us some love, show us that you can hear us, you can see us. It's the broadcast is all good, and by all means, invite to your friends and family to join this broadcast. And if you have missed previous episodes, then you can catch up on the Quranic Parables Facebook page, where we've listed the previous episodes. So as usual, before we actually go into the parable of the night, we try to remind ourselves and others of some of the virtues of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, either by mentioning a verse or a hadith or maybe a saying of one of the pious predecessors. So Ustaz Saf, what do you have tonight?
Bismillah wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi man wala. So Ustad, this evening I've got a hadith. Alhamdulillah, it is a well-known hadith, but again, it'd be good for us to remind ourselves sometimes, even hadiths that we know, reminding ourselves of it still is powerful. So this is the hadith that's from Abdullah bin Mas'ud radiyallahu ta'ala an. And he said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam said, "Man qara'a harfan min kitabillahi falahu hasanah, wal hasanah bi'ashri amthaliha, la aqul alif lam harf, walakin alifun harfun wa lamu harf wa mimun harf." So the Messenger of Allah in this hadith is saying that whoever recites just a letter from the Quran, man qara'a harfan min kitabillah, so a letter from the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what will he or she have? Lahu bihi hasana. They'll be credited with a good deed. And wal hasana to be ashari amthaliha, and a good deed gets a tenfold reward. And then the Prophet said, what I don't mean is la aqulu alif lam mim harf. So the Prophet says, when you say alif lam mim, that's not one letter. Rather, alifun harf, lam harf, wa mim harf. Rather, you get the reward of saying alif 10 times, lam 10 reward for saying lam once, and mim, you get 10 rewards for saying mim once. So in total, you get 30 rather than 10. So Allah, out of His mercy, is multiplying our reward for every letter.
Subhanallah. Subhanallah, amazing hadith, encouraging us to forever to get close to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and just the reward, the sheer reward of just reciting the
letter.
A letter, you get 10 rewards per letter. So imagine if we are reciting not just a couple of letters, but verses and chapters, and in fact the entire Quran itself. Subhanallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the reward and the ajr during this.
I do have to mention to Ameen Ya Rab. So some people did say to me that they try and read the Quran during the day.
Yes.
But for whatever reason, even in lockdown, there's still people are busy. But when it comes to our session in the evening, that gives them a chance to read an ayah of the Quran or two.
Alhamdulillah.
For the day. So I thought, subhanAllah.
No, alhamdulillah, that's inshallah we'll get the reward of that as well from their reading as well. Right, so brothers and sisters, let us move to the amthal for tonight. Let me just share the screen, and then we can actually go into it. But what I'll need to do is just kind of set a bit of a scene for the discussion tonight. So, Bismillah. So we have here, this verse. It's about spending from Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 264, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 264. Now, just as a way of setting the scene for this is that we actually started looking at some of these verses regarding spending and some of the parables included in them. That I think the first one that we did at the beginning of Ramadan was verse 261, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala he introduces the parable of grains of corn that produce 7 years, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Mathalu alladhina yunfiquna amwalahum fi sabilillahi kamathalin habbatin ambatat sab'a sanabila fi kulli sumbulatin mi'atu habba wallahu yuda'ifu liman yasha wallahu wasi'un alim. Those who spend their wealth in God's cause are like grains of corn that produce 7 ears, each bearing 100 grains. God gives multiple increases to whoever he wishes. He is limitless and all is knowing. Then the following verse, verse 262, I don't remember whether we discussed it or not, but it's important to just to mention it to give context to this amthal that we have on the screen today. That the following verse was الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ ثُمَّ لَا يُتْبِعُونَ مَا أَنْفَقُوا مَنًّا وَلَا أَذًى لَهُمْ أَجْرُهُمْ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ وَلَا خَوْفٌ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا هُمْ يَحْزَنُونَ. And those who spend their wealth in God's cause and do not follow their spending with reminders of their benevolence or hurtful words will have their rewards with their Lord, no fear for them, nor will they grieve. Then we have the verse 263, which is the verse before the one that was on the screen, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قَوْلٌ مَعْرُوفٌ وَمَغْفِرَةٌ خَيْرٌ مِّن صَدَقَاتٍ يَتْبَعُهَا أَذًى وَاللَّهُ غَنِيٌّ حَلِيمٌ. A kind word and forgiveness is better than a charitable deed followed by hurtful words. God is self-sufficient and forbearing. So now we are, these verses obviously they're all centered around spending, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already mentioned in this verse and in the previous verse about the etiquettes and the ethics and the hidden motivations around spending. And already it's been mentioned in this verse in 263 that Allah says, a kind word and forgiveness, خَيْرٌ مِّن صَدَقَاتٍ يَتْبَعُهَا أَذًى, is better than charitable deeds followed by harmful words, and Allah is sufficient and forbearing. And here in this verse, we are going to be talking about today of how our charities can become, or our sadaqah can become invalidated. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives a example here of كَمَثَلِ صَفْوَانٍ عَلَيْهِ تُرَابٌ فَأَسَابَهُ وَابِلٌ فَتَرَكَهُ صَلْدًا, which we'll go into inshallah. And then the following verse after that, 265, there is another verse about spending and giving us the contrast, the spending of the believers and their etiquettes. So it's just setting the scene. So these verses, they're in a cluster of verses around spending. So if you want to kind of, read around these verses about spending, then by all means do that. So inshallah, let's just dive into this particular verse that we have, 264. Let's listen to the recitation first, and then we'll do a translation. I don't know if you can hear me. I think my computer has crashed.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I hear you.
You can hear me, but I wonder why my computer is not responding. So I'm just thinking what's happening to the broadcast even. Brothers and sisters, I'm not sure if you can hear me, whether we're still broadcasting or not. So I'm just having a wee technical problem. So let's see, inshallah, if this can be resolved. If not, we might have to, we are still live, and I think we're still live. Yes, we are. Let's see what's happened. My computer has frozen. We're back. So let's see if we are still broadcasting. I think we are. Right, I think we're still broadcasting, and it's good. So my computer's decided to freeze, but let's proceed, inshallah, with the recitation.
يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تبطلوا صدقاتكم بالمن والأذى كالذي ينفق ماله رئاء الناس ولا يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فمثله كمثل صفوان عليه تراب فأصابه وابل فتركه صلدا لا يقدرون على شيء مما كسبوا والله لا يهدي القوم الكافرين.
Sadaqallahu al-Azim. In the translation, O you who believe, do not cancel out your charitable deeds with reminders and hurtful words, like someone who spends his wealth only to be seen by people, not believing in God and the last day. Such a person is like a rock with earth on it. Heavy rains falls and leaves it completely bare. Such people get no rewards for their works. God does not guide the disbelievers. This is Surah Al-Baqarah, verse number 264. So inshallah ta'ala, let's go to the next slide, and then let's look at the details and the analysis of the verse, inshallah ta'ala. So I've got, as usual, a couple of pictures on the slide. Ustad, you can see the pictures?
Definitely.
Yeah. So
again, another dollar bill.
Yeah, we've got another dollar bill going into a charity box of sort, indicating on spending, and then we've got a rock as per the verse. So hopefully we can leverage these two images alongside with the verse. So Bismillah, let's start with our usual sort of breakdown of the verse, and let's see what particular benefits that we can get from this.
Right. So Bismillah. So we've got, obviously the verse begins with Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. So it's a reminder, calling attention to the believers. So this is the whole verse actually, oh you believe, do not cancel your charitable deeds. This is a ta'reed. This is a reminder, a warning by indication to the believers to be aware of the qualities that are just going to be mentioned about the hypocrites. So here we see our simile components. So let's break that down. So we have the likened, the mushabbah. So who are they? Obviously it's the believers, or those, so whoever it is, so not the believers necessarily, but whoever it is that spends their wealth for charity. And it's referring to الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُ مَالَهُ رِئَاءَ النَّاسِ. So it's those who spend money, in order to show people. So it's those who are spending money, يُنْفِقُ مَالَهُ رِئَاءَ النَّاسِ وَلَا يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ. And these people don't actually believe in Allah and the last day, but that's something that's a matter of the heart. And what are they compared to? مُشَبَّهْ بِهِ. They are كَمَثَلِ صَفْوَانٍ عَلَيْهِ تُرَابٌ فَأَصَابَهُ وَابِلٌ فَتَرَكَهُ صَلْدًا. So they're compared to a stone that's حجرة, sort of a very smooth stone where something falls on it and it just slips off. And the simile element there is kamathal, as you can see. Ustaz has just highlighted it in red there. So the green is the mushabbah bihi, the red is the kalladhi yunfiqu malahu, and kamathal there, Ustaz has just underlined it in bold, I think there, bold red. And the wajhu shabah is the adamul intifa'. Adamul intifa', lack of benefit or swift loss, i.e. because you get no gain at all, things like that. So that's the basic simile components done. So what does la tubtilu, very quickly, sadaqatikum mean? So here la tubtilu means ولا تبتلوا ثوابها. Don't, by giving money and showing off, if you do that as believers, then you're going to lose the reward of your action. So if we show our actions off, then we're going to lose the reward for that action. So it just becomes a hollow, empty, pointless action. And then Allah saying, obviously, this is what the hypocrite do, those who don't believe in Allah and the day and the last day. They spend trying to show people how pious and generous and munificent they are, but inside they have no belief at all. Riya and nas, showing off people. The reason why showing off is not rewarded, because the action الرياء غير مثاب لأنه لم يقصد وجه الله. The only reason it's not rewarded is because one didn't do it out of seeking Allah's pleasure. So it wasn't done for Allah. It was done to show people. So that's why it's got no reward. And then the last bit here of this verse, فَتَرَكَهُ صَلْدًا. So this rock, it'll be left, a rock that is, as in the picture there, very smooth. Rain falls on it and washes off whatever's on it. So nothing sticks to it. So this is what the ayah is mentioning here. That heavy rain falls on that safwan, that stone, and then washes whatever's on the stone away. And Allah is saying this is the case with actions. When we show them off, those deeds are going to vanish and disappear. So it's a very, very stark warning. لا يقدرون على شيء مما كسبوا والله لا يهدي القوم الكافرين. And look at that. They're not going to be able to do anything. Whatever deeds they did, that's not going to benefit them whatsoever. They're not going to be able to do. They have no power over those deeds, having done them, because they've got no reward and they're empty. And so Allah doesn't guide people who are disbelievers. So that's the general sort of basic tafsir of the ayah. I want to alert our readers to something that I may not have picked up on. I don't think we've mentioned before. But this is something we call a rhetorical shift, an iltifat. And this is where it is. Maybe some of our discerning viewers know this already. But this is one of the examples of iltifat in Surah Al-Baqarah, and there are many. And this is iltifat min al-mukhatab ila al-ghayba. This is iltifat from the second person to the third person. So if you look at what's the evidence that the verse starts in the second person? Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tubtilu sadaqatikum. Yeah? So, O believers, don't invalidate your charitable deeds. Right? So it starts in the second person, you. First person is I, third person is he, she, they, it. Yeah? But then Allah shifts it to the third person. So it starts from, don't cancel out your charitable deeds like someone كالذي ينفق ماله رئاء الناس ولا يؤمن بالله ولا واليوم الآخر. So then he shifts to the third person, they, he. So it starts with you, then it shifts to they.
So Ustad, I'm just going to highlight it. So
yeah, sorry.
La tubtilu.
So that's second person, isn't it? Sadaqatikum.
Yeah, and then, yeah, this is all second person.
Mukhatab. We call that sighatul mukhatab.
Yes, that's the second person. And then,
but then look at this. كالذي ينفق ماله. Now it's
third person.
In the third person. Like he who, or whoever, yunfiqu, in the third person now, spends his wealth. It doesn't say, like you who spend your wealth by showing off. Now, why is that shift being made? Some of the Mufassirun say, the reason why there's a shift from the second person to the third person, wallahu a'lam, is in order to clarify, make clear and highlight to the believer against the act of showing off. That's possible. So it's like clarification, tawdih. Yeah. The other reason could be for bu'ud, to distance the believer from that kind of act by shifting it from the second person to the third person. Can you see? If I keep saying you, I'm implying you're involved. I'm imputing it to you. But if I now move it away from you and say he, it, I'm moving it away from you now. I'm moving the focus away from you. So here it could be that Allah doesn't want to impute the believers with that kind of action because it's despicable. So the shift is trying to mark that. You see?
So here, so the benefit of the iltifat here is warning the believers of not being like the hypocrites.
Yeah, that's right. Because Allah wants to distance the believer from this kind of act. Because the aim behind this tashbih, the gharad behind this tashbih is tafdhi' al-mushabbah bihi. It's to humiliate and show how despicable and ugly the mushabbah bihi is. You see? So how ugly the mushabbah is, sorry. Those who spend by showing off. So Allah's trying to use this simile to show how despicable these kind of people are, who spend their money to show off. So Allah wants to distance the believer from that kind of act. How does he do that? Allahu A'lam. He does a shift in person. From second to third. Allahu A'lam. Allahu A'lam. That's very subtle. If our viewers haven't got it, don't worry. Don't worry. But it's a beautiful part of the Quran. So rather than Allah continuing with you to the believers, Allah's moving away from you and distancing the believers from the act of this hypocritical act by going into the third person.
MashaAllah. And also the in terms of the actual parable that's been mentioned, كَمَثَلِ صَفْوَانٍ عَلَيْهِ تُرَابٌ فَأَصَابَهُ وَابِلٌ فَتَرَكَهُ صَلْدًا. Now, it's been compared with a rock where there's some dust or some light earth is on it, and heavy rain falls and leaves it completely bare, indicating on the fact that whatever action or whatever. So this dust, I'm kind of think this dust or this soil doesn't have any power, doesn't have any ability to withstand the actual rain itself, and it just dissipates, and this shows that, you know, the lack of benefit, swift loss, as one of the key things, that doesn't have any there's no, you know, intrinsic benefit in it whatsoever. And I think, you know, the verse la yaqdiruna ala shay'in mimma kasabu, and they're not able to you know, gain anything from or hold on to anything, gain anything from what they have done in terms of reward. And it's talking about in the hereafter, they might have done all of these outwardly good acts in terms of giving charity, spending on the people, and getting, you know, people appreciating them. But on the hereafter, there's no value in that. It's like, you know, the verse we mentioned before, فَجَعَلْنَاهُ هَبَاءً مَنْثُورًا, and we will make it like on the day of judgment, those actions which didn't have any true sincerity, they'll be like, you know, scattered particles on the day of judgment, have no value itself. So this parable, it's, you know, one of the key sort of lessons that we learn from it is about the intention, the sincerity, the purpose by which you actually give the sadaqah itself. We have some, you know, points of reflection, which I'll just go to and mention them, so we can move on, inshallah. Let's just look at that. So I've got some points of reflection here, which is point one. I think you already touched the issue of nifaq, hypocrisy, because this verse is actually warning the believers not to be like the hypocrites, the munafiqs, and it's very dangerous. And the issue of the difference between a mu'min and a hypocrite fundamentally comes down to the inner state, in terms of our intention, our inner beliefs, and why we're doing things. Because outwardly, a believer and a hypocrite, on the surface of it, will be doing the same actions. So as far as people are concerned, there's no difference between them, because their actions are identical. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's now looking at the issue of the intention, the why you're doing it. And again, fundamentally comes down to this basic belief of Muslims, you know, innamal a'malu bin niyyat, that the actions are according to the intentions. So the issue of danger of nifaq is being is mentioned here, and we need to constantly strive to, you know, battle against it, especially in a society that celebrates, you know, riya and nas, showing off. And we live in a culture, I guess, which is where, you know, being famous, you know, and now with social media and, you know, access to technology and what have you, you know, you can become famous, and you know, you can have your name lit in stars, if you like. So the opportunity to show off is far more greater in this day and age today, because of the technology that we have, the interconnectedness that we have, meaning that you know, for the believer, you know, we have to be even extra careful, given this, you know, the technological reach that we have when we do an action. While we're doing that action, is it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or is it to gain fame and, you know, and richness and wealth? So that's a really important point we learned from that. The second point that I had, which was on the slide, which I'll come back to, that philanthropic activities in the West. I mean, you have, you know, very, very rich people, you know, mega millionaires and billionaires and what have you, and they are involved in philanthropic activities. And what is interesting recently, more and more now, that a lot of these activities are they're not as altruistic as we might actually come to see, but they are to do with, you know, being tax efficient. You get tax, philanthropy, you can get tax breaks and what have you in America, in Britain, etc. So there is the issue of what on the surface of it, it seems like they're doing something good, but there's usually, unfortunately, in many cases, not in all, there is a ulterior motive, of taking, saving money on your tax bills. I mean, recently, I think there's been a lot of criticism about is it Jeff Bezos? He gave 100 million, but he makes 100 million like in 11 days, right? And in terms of and there was a lot of discussion about in terms of tax breaks and tax efficiencies and etc. But there is this whole question we find in the West, when rich people are spending, there's usually some conditions attached to it, and we see that in the common culture. People might give big donations to this university or this company or this research lab, or a grant this make this grant available for this particular thing, but there's usually some conditions built into that.
But you got to remember this, what I think is dubbed philanthrocapitalism. Yeah, you got to remember that the hypocrisy of it is this. I think you alluded to, Stan. So these billionaires, they would wave in front of the public, the fact that they're giving money to charitable causes, but the amount they give is meager compared to the problems that they've created. You see,
absolutely, and the other thing is, I think some people are making the point, keep your millions, but let us have a more fair and representative tax system. So they pay very little tax, but if they were to pay their due tax, proper taxes.
Well, that's the point. The fact that their misbehavior, they're allowed to acquire billions at the expense of society, the taxpayer, people, ethics, right? But in return, they give back 2 million, let's say 3 million in philanthropy. So the very system allows them to exploit, to make billions, but for somehow they're on the moral high ground for giving back millions in philanthropy. It's sheer hypocrisy. I mean, I'm sorry, but
I mean, that's one point that I think is worthwhile thinking about. The other point was this issue of لا تبطلوا صدقاتكم بالمن والأذى, which is when you are giving, what will invalidate your sadaqah, your spending, is if you are constantly reminding people of your favors that you have done to people, and also other hurting people. And this creates a mindset in an Islamic society or in a Muslim community of how do we actually look towards those who are less fortunate than us. That is not one of that I am doing you a favor. This issue of man is basically reminding people that I am doing you a favor, that you don't have food, I'm giving you food, therefore be grateful to me. You don't have any clothes on your back, I'm putting clothes on your back, so be grateful to me. So this this attitude of looking down on those who don't have, the haves and the don't haves, and this is a major problem in the Western societies, that you have, there is a opinion that if you're on welfare, right, then you're kind of scrounging off the system. You're scrounging off the rich people. You're not pulling your weight. There's a whole public opinion against those who are less fortunate, maybe don't have a job, maybe who are disabled or some other problems they have where they can't actually contribute to the economy itself. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not only is addressing an ethical issue of, in the Islamic society, whether you are rich or whether you're poor, that there shouldn't be this attitude, this chauvinistic attitude of the ones who have, and that usually comes from entitlement, because they believe that I've worked really hard. They believe that I was smart, right? They believe that I've actually did my hard graft in society, therefore I'm entitled to it, and therefore I have this right. Where issue of wealth in Islam. Al-mal, you know, al-mal lillah, it belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala completely, you know, and we are just custodians, and we are just people who Allah has given us wealth, and we need to spend that wealth, you know, the way He has told us. And the one who is truly has the right to do man is not us, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah, that's right.
And one of His name is
Al-Mannan.
Al-Mannan. So I think these are important points for reflection. So let's move to the next. I know it's going to be a lengthy session, but you can watch it in parts. But the next verse, it kind of contrasts with this particular verse. So let's move to that, inshallah ta'ala. Okay. So this is the following verse, 265, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives a contrasting example of a believer when he is actually spending, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes his state of affairs, and also a particular method is given. So let's listen to the recitation, inshallah.
وَمَثَلُ الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمُ ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ وتثبيتا من أنفسهم كمثل جنة بربوة أصابها وابل فآتت أكلها ضعفين فإن لم يصبها وابل فطل والله بما تعملون بصير.
Sadaqallahu al-Azim. So in the translation, but those who spend their wealth in order to gain God's approval and as in affirmation of their own faith are like a garden on a hill. Heavy rain falls and it produces double its normal yield. Even if no heavy rain falls, it will still be watered by the dew. God sees all that you do. So let's go to the next slide and look at the breakdown, inshallah. So again, you know, I've got an image, you know, a dollar going into, maybe I should have had some dinar or dirhams going into a box, but this time the comparison is with a garden on a hill. As you can see, the garden is very luscious compared to that that rock that was mentioned earlier on, with spending of the hypocrite was compared to with a rock with a smooth surface. But here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is comparing it with a garden on a hill. So let's just go into our simile components, Ustad.
All right. So again, this is a standard format now. The likened here is the believers. Before the mushabbah, the likened was the munafiqun. Now Allah is talking about the believers. The likened, the mushabbah. مثل الذين ينفقون أموالهم ابتغاء مرضات الله. So this is the qarina that's about the believers, because they're seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now what are they compared to? What's the likened to? Then كمثل جنة بربوة أصابها وابل فآتت أكلها ضعفين. So Allah compares the believers to those who spend their wealth ابتغاء مرضات الله, those who seek the pleasure and the approval of Allah. They're likened to a raised garden that is, you know, plentiful, abundant, lush, beautiful yield, much like sort of the picture there Ustad as plucked out. So that's the mushabbah bihi, and obviously the simile element, the adatu tashbih, is kamathal. So mathalu kamathali. So mathalu kamathali. So that's by now the familiar, our viewers I'm sure are familiar with that now. So mathalu kamathali. And then the wajhu shabah, the simile, underlying simile feature, is about benefit, gain, growth, success, a combination of these things. Now, let me just mention a word about tathbeet. So Allah says, مثل الذين ينفقون أموالهم ابتغاء مرضات الله تثبيتا من أنفسهم. So tathbeet here means sort of conviction, a strong affirmation, being fully confident, but being fully confident and hopeful in Allah's reward. So it's a bit like, you know, the hadith, Man sama Ramadan imanan wa ihtisaban. So whoever fasts Ramadan, obviously with iman, but in full hope of reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is what tathbeetan means here. So that's tathbeet, just to put that out there. So it's about having conviction in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rewarding them. And then again, I mentioned the term iltifat. For those of our viewers who probably just joined us now, I mentioned in the last simile iltifat, which is like a rhetorical shift. And that can happen in lots of different ways. One of the ways that happened in the previous verse is that Allah shifted from the second person to the third person. But here, Allah does the opposite, Jalla wa'ala. He shifts from the third person to the second person. So the third person is on the top. الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ. Yeah? Those who spend their wealth. So that's third person, right? So Ustad is highlighted in blue. But now look at the end part of the verse. وَاللَّهُ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ بَصِيرٌ. Allah sees all that you do, O believers. You. So the shift now is from the third person to the second person. Iltifat min al-ghaib ila sighat al-mukhatab. From the third person to the second. Now why? Why has Allah made this happen? One of the reasons why, Allah knows best, Mufassirun say, is it's perhaps Allah knows that giving money for the sake of Allah is still hard. Giving away your money is hard. You know, our hard-earned money, especially in times now when people are furloughed, have lost their job, and zakat time is coming up. Sadaqah al-fitr is coming up. Absolutely. So people giving their wealth is not easy. Allah knows that, even for His sake. He knows it's not easy. But by shifting it from a third person distant form, Allah brings it to the second person, addressing the believers directly, reassuring them that, look, your deeds will not go unnoticed. It will not go unnoticed by Allah. That's why Allah says, بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ بَصِيرٌ. However little you give, or however much you give, it's not going to go unnoticed by Allah. Allah sees every action. So that's a kind of assurance to the believer that Allah is honing in on them, addressing them directly. Rather, if it was in the third person, it would have felt a bit distant and disengaged. Allah is saying directly now to the believers, don't worry. I can see everything. Everything you give, I'm watching you. And it will not go unnoticed, it will not go to waste.
So, Ustad, one of the points I was just thinking about in terms of the mathal that's been made, which is كَمَثَلِ جَنَّاتٍ بِرَبْوَةٍ أَسَابَهَا وَابِلٌ. That it's like a garden on a hill, and heavy rain falls on it, and فَآتَتْ أُكُلَهَا ضِعْفَيْنِ, and it produces double its normal yield. Meaning, and again, it's coming back to this earlier parable about the grains, that, you know, if you are sowing the grains, it will give an harvest. In the same way here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that, you know, whatever you're spending, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He will you know, double it. He will increase it in many folds. And then the فَإِن لَمْ يُصِبْهَا وَابِلٌ فَطَالٌ. And if it is, you know, even a drizzle that's falling on it, there still will be some yield, which, you know, suggests that, you know, that whether you're spending a lot, whether you're spending a very little, whatever you're spending, you will always get something from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your spending.
That's right. This is it, subhanAllah. So even if you don't get the maximum yield, you will get yield. So there's never a loss with a believer when he spends in the way of Allah. That's the point. It will never go unnoticed, it will never be missed and misspent.
And which contrasts with the, I'm just, if I just go back to the previous slide, where we were looking at the example of, let me just clear all of this drawing. We were looking at the example of those who spend by showing off and, you know, reminding of their favors. Allah mentioned that, again, he mentioned the rock. Such a person is like a rock with the earth on it. Heavy rain falls on it and leaves it completely bare. There was no
nothing on it, not even a dust.
Not even a dust. Yeah, there was no result from it whatsoever. So that's the comparison that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is making, that, you know, a lot of rain can fall on a rock, but there's no actual benefit. Nothing comes out of it whatsoever. Whereas the example that Allah has mentioned for the believers, you know, it could be a lot of rain or little, and there's going to be benefits for the believers. So, subhanallah, it's a very beautiful parable. So in terms of some reflection points, I think here is, first one is to do with, again, importance of sincerity and having conviction, because the verse mentions ibtigha'a mardatillah. They are seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's contrasting with the hypocrite who are seeking the pleasure of people by showing off. So that's the contrast. And secondly, وَتَثْبِيتًا مِنْ أَنفُسِهِمْ, they have firm conviction and iman and sincerity that they will get a reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I think you mentioned the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that, you know, similar to the hadith, whoever stands in the month of Ramadan fast, then for him, you know, غَفَرَ لَهُ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنْ ذَنْبِهِ, for him will be, all of his previous sins will be forgiven. So here there is a the importance of sincerity and conviction when spending in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the sake of Allah, and it's contrasted with what we talked about earlier on, that you have, you know, fake altruism in the Western society, or philanthropy, where basically, you know, you're driven by being tax efficient, you're driven by, you know, how to actually, you know, save more money. You got all of these kind of designs and means and ways in order to save money. So really, it's not really true altruism. True altruism is when you're doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not for worldly gains or reputation. And the other thing I think is, here there's you know, it's about money, it's about spending, and there is a concept, I think, which is fundamentally unique to Islamic society compared to capitalism. In capitalism, the only value that's recognized in the economic sphere is the materialistic value, i.e. the bottom line, the profit. That's the main value that is accounted for, and they don't really consider the other values. I mean, they would consider, you know, charitable as the third sector, it's a non-profit making sector, but it's not part and parcel of the economic model in capitalism. Where in Islam, the issue of spending, the responsibility of the rich towards the poor, is not only a optional issue, but it's a mandatory issue in Islam. It's an obligatory issue, and it is done not because they're going to get a tax break, not because, you know,
some material gain.
It's for a material gain, but because Islam looks at the economy in a very holistic way, where yes, profit is a valid motive when you're doing business, but that's not the only basis of the Islamic economy. The Islamic economy is founded upon values, spiritual, humanitarian, ethical, material. It's a mixture of values that motivates the Islamic economy itself. And I think, you know, this question of you know, there's a big fundamental question, which is now, for example, you know, the government in the West, especially with coronavirus or what have you, these massive interventions that government has made, which is effectively stacking up debt for future generations to be paid. But there isn't a question in the minds of these politicians, what have you, that we got super billionaires in our countries, right? What is their role? What is their responsibility towards this, right? Where in
Their
Islam,
responsibility is to be responsibilities on the taxpayer to bail them out.
absolutely. I mean, you got the likes of, you know, Richard Branson and others who are, you know, super zillionaires, you know, going to the government for bailouts. But there's a point here in an Islamic society when we do have emergency funding situations, right? It's the people who have the wealth, the people who have the resources. Yeah, it is their responsibility towards society to fulfill those needs, and they should be doing that ibtigha mardatillah. This is the reason why they should be doing, because they want to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when you have a capitalist mentality where everything is about the bottom line and it's everything about the last penny or the last cent, yeah, then it's very difficult for that society to, you know, rely upon their super rich, yeah, in order to help those who actually need help. And I think these verses, they give us a insight into the nature of the Islamic economic system, which is, you know, which has altruism as part of its system, is intrinsic part of it, and is not something optional. It's not something nice to have. And I think these verses should make us think in that way. Unfortunately, sometimes we just think about these verses in the very narrow context of raising charity for this fund or this cause, and we'll bring these verses to motivate people, which is fine. But in the wider context, these verses, they actually inform a philosophy towards Islamic economy. Any other final thoughts?
I think that was comprehensive. Alhamdulillah.
Okay, brothers and sisters, this was a rather lengthy session today because we had two amthal to get through, and we thought we'd just do it in one go. But if you need to watch it in two parts, you can watch it in two parts, part A and part B. I'll mark it on the video, inshallah ta'ala. And apologies for some technical difficulties earlier on, especially on my behalf, but alhamdulillah, we managed to get through it. So brothers and sisters, we'll be back tomorrow night, inshallah ta'ala, with another amthal from the Quran. So from myself, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.